The rabble among them had a strong craving, and the Israelites also wept again and said, "If only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we used to eat in Egypt for nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now our strength is dried up, and there is nothing at all but this manna to look at." Moses heard the people weeping throughout their families, all at the entrances of their tents. Then the Lord became very angry, and Moses was displeased. So Moses said to the Lord, "Why have you treated your servant so badly? Why have I not found favor in your sight, that you lay the burden of all these people on me? Did I conceive all these people? Did I give birth to them, that you should say to me, 'Carry them in your bosom as a nurse carries a suckling child to the land that you promised on oath to their ancestors'? Where am I to get meat to give all these people? For they come weeping to me and say, 'Give us meat to eat.' I am not able to carry all these people alone, for they are too heavy for me. If this is the way you are going to treat me, put me to death at once, if I have found favor in your sight, and do not let me see my misery." So the Lord said to Moses, Gather for me 70 of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be the elders of the people and officers over them. Bring them to the tent of meeting and have them take their place there with you."
So Moses went out and told the people the words of the Lord, and gathered 70 elders of the people, and placed them all around the tent. And the Lord came down in the cloud and spoke to them, and took some of the Spirit that was on him, and put it in the 70 elders. And when the Spirit rested upon them, they prophesied. But they did not do so again. 2 men remained in the camp, one named Eldad and one named Medad. The Spirit rested on them. They were among those registered. They had not gone out to the tent, so they prophesied in the camp. And the young man ran out and told Moses, "Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp." And Joshua, son of Nun, the assistant of Moses, one of his chosen men, said, "My lord Moses, stop them." Moses said to him, "Are you jealous for my sake? Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, and the Lord would put his Spirit on them."
Thank you. He said, "Would that the Lord's people were prophets and the Lord would put his Spirit on them." It was going to be a long trip across that desert with all those children of God complaining mightily. I remember long trips in the car when I was a child, reminiscent of the Israelites on a smaller scale. When are we going to get there? I'm hungry. Do we have to eat peanut butter sandwiches and Tang again? Hey, he touched me. Make him move his arm away from me. I'm too cold. I'm too hot. Oh, so many complaints. Moses had to contend with a whole lot more children than my parents did. At the beginning of the book of Numbers, all the tribes are identified and totaled. The census reveals there are 603,550 men 20 years old and upward, plus women and children. How would you like to be in charge of that lot? The men alone nearly equal the population of Vermont. This encounter with the Israelites is after they have crossed the Red Sea and have been on the road a ways. It is a time of uncertainty and risk. Meat and other good foods are not readily available. Not many restaurants or kebab cafes are open. They've reached a point of desperation, thinking, well, we may have been slaves in Egypt, but at least we could get decent food. Illness and death seem to be ever present. Nothing is like what they are used to. They wonder how they will ever get through this and what things will be like on the other side. There was a sense of abandonment. No doubt they questioned, what's next? How will we get there? Well, the Israelites caused Moses to intercede with God, and the Israelites' complaints fuel Moses to make his own complaints to God. He says, what's the deal, God? You know, I did not sign up for this, and I would be happy to get out of it any time now. What am I supposed to do with all these unhappy, uncomfortable people? A little help here would be appreciated. God responds to Moses. God inspires Moses to appoint elders and officers to help him with this large community of faith. How about that? Elders and officers. Sounds to me like evidence that God may be Presbyterian. And what a relief for Moses. But before they can even get started with a new plan, one of the chosen, Joshua, comes to Moses complaining that a couple of guys are prophesying where they aren't supposed to. And what's Moses' response to that? Basically, he says, thank goodness someone is taking some initiative and changing old ways of doing things. I wish everyone would step up and serve as leaders who share the presence of God. When I initially read today's passage from Numbers, it struck me how familiar it sounded. It is a very contemporary situation. We have been on the road in this pandemic for a long time. It is still a time of uncertainty and risk. There was a time last year when people feared that meat would not be available. Shelves were empty in grocery stores. It still isn't really safe to eat inside restaurants, though takeout and outdoor eating are possible. Like the Israelites, we have often felt a sense of desperation. We have been surrounded by illness and death. We wonder how we will ever get through this and what things will be like on the other side. Sometimes we feel abandoned by God, and we ask, what's next? And how will we get there? It also has been a difficult time for leaders of all sorts, including in the church. Now, I don't use Twitter myself, but I read that there's a tweet that has been circulating between pastors that says, I did not realize when I entered the ordination process that I was signing up to be a chaplain to the apocalypse. It's funny, but not funny, and pretty much what Moses was feeling. As the Delta variant spreads and COVID-19 cases rise again, leaders are having to make difficult, complicated decisions for the health and safety of our communities. Do we need to return to online worship only? What can we do safely? What shouldn't we do? How do we keep people connected? How do we move forward with both safety and imagination? Whatever decisions are made, some will be unhappy and some will complain. We're in good company with Moses and his desert trekkers. Unlike Moses, we already have elders and officers and deacons and many other faithful people in place. The story of Moses and their time of great uncertainty serves to remind us of the importance of shared leadership, shared ministry. No one can do it alone. Everyone has gifts to offer. Everyone shares in the shepherding and feeding of the flock. It seems like a good lead-in for a message from the church nominating committee. I think the committee would agree with Moses. We wish everyone would step up and serve as leaders who share the presence of God. We are in need of people to serve on session as deacons, on the audit committee and celebration fund. So I encourage you to spend time in prayer. Ask God where you can best serve God's people. If you've been approached by the nominating committee, listen for God's call in your heart. If you've already said no, perhaps you might reconsider if there is a role to which God calls you. If you're unable to serve in an elected role, there are many other ways that you provide leadership and share God's presence among us. You do so by expressing appreciation for and supporting the boards, the committees, and staff that keep our ministry alive, especially in uncertain times. The Finance and Property Stewardship Committee has its plate full of building and financial issues. Faith formation has creatively provided ways to connect and learn together, even when we've been distanced. Mission and outreach makes sure our ministry goes beyond First Presbyterian. And the Personnel Committee got more than they expected this year, searching for and finding a new secretary and a new music director, both of whom are wonderful additions to our staff. We have ruling elders and caring deacons, number crunchers, outreachers and imaginators, teachers and learners, musicians, media gurus, and creation caretakers, and many more, all working together, sharing God's love, building up God's kingdom, God's beloved community on earth through the work of the church. Moses could not do it alone. None of us can go it alone through the shifting sands of the desert. The Israelites felt abandoned, but God was always with them. God was always faithful to God's promises. God is always with us, creating new ways through challenging times. We do not walk alone. We are in it together, using the resources we have, whether it's manna and quails, or a building and people, and the financial support of all of you who are able to contribute. We operate in the commonwealth of God, not the economy of the world. In this alternative way of being, those who have much, lots of manna and quails and leadership power, do not feel a sense of privilege and superiority, but rather a greater sense of responsibility. for their neighbors who are most vulnerable, and for the well-being of the whole. When the ground beneath us feels like it's shifting like sands in a desert, we reground ourselves on Christ, the solid rock, and we seek God's presence and guidance to lead and transform us. Times of uncertainty can be filled with fear and complaints. They can also be times of bravery, imagination, and transformation. I don't think it's an either-or proposition. We are constantly finding our way along this continuum. Author and activist Sonia Renee Taylor was quoted in a recent Presbyterian Outlook article. She says, "We will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal, other than we normalized greed, inequity, exhaustion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature. We make our way through the desert with confidence and caring because we are all interconnected with each other. This is what our theology and our faith teach us. We work with one another, and not just by joining committees. We work with one another to shape our ministry. We imagine positive what-if scenarios that lead to transformation instead of just tweaking the old ways. We ask why we do certain things and find clarity that allows us to be open to different ways of accomplishing our purpose. Presbyterian minister Jessica Tate recalls the Apollo 13 mission during which there was the crisis of a failing oxygen system. The astronauts had to take all the pieces they had on board and imagine an entirely new way to route their oxygen supply in the lifeboat while they preserved power in the space shuttle for the return home. We too have abundant resources, which we don't always acknowledge or even notice. There is manna falling from heaven. Working together creatively, we are walking forward into the unknowable future. We are imagining and discovering new ways, just as the Israelites did, no longer looking back to Egypt and not yet in sight of Canaan. Curiosity overcomes fear. Gratitude and generosity negate any sense of scarcity. The Israelites were nomadic people, always on the move, walking through the uncharted, shifting sands of time and the desert. Today, we continue to move through unknowns and uncertainties. We keep moving because we are people of the way that Jesus laid down for us. It is the way that is charted by the love of God and neighbor. Love is the way. It is God saying, I love you, I love you, I love you. And our striving to love as God loves. The way is always paved with love and discovered in love. Many of you are in small groups reading and discussing Brian McLaren's book, We Make the Road by Walking. And as Sarah said, if you're not already in a group, you can join one anytime. The way the book is written, you can join anytime throughout the year. And you could start a group too. Now, Brian starts out in his preface saying, "You all have the capacity to learn, mature, think, change, and grow. You also have the freedom to stagnate, regress, constrict, and lose your way. Which road will you take?" It's a good question. Which road, which way will we take through the desert? Brian concludes chapter 1 with these words: "And so we join the Creator in good and fruitful work, and in delightful enjoyment, play, and rest as well." Brian continues, "So here we are, friends, here we are, alive, and this is why we walk this road, to behold the wonder and savor this aliveness, to remind ourselves who we are, where we are, what's going on here, and how beautiful, precious, holy, and meaningful it all is. That's why we pause along the journey for a simple meal with hearts full of thankfulness, rejoicing to be part of this beautiful and good creation. This is what it means to be alive." End quote. And so we keep on walking together into the unknowable future, knowing that we do not walk alone. God is always present, and we continue to love and support one another and the community around us. Thanks be to God, who gives manna that feeds our souls. Amen.